Well, it's a special day, ladies and gentlemen. It is a day to celebrate love. Do you know where Valentine's Day came from?
I know I've probably heard it over the years,
well,
but I've forgotten.
There was a man in Rome whose name was Valentine, and he was in prison for his faith. He was a Christian.
Really?
And he wrote a letter to his wife, and he said, "Your Valentine."
Is that true?
It's true. You don't think I would sit here and
Not that I
mislead
doubt you,
you,
Pat, but
but that's where it came from. Your Valentine, and that's where Valentine's Day celebrates a Christian martyr in Rome who was executed for his faith. So, with all that in mind, we're going to tell you how you can live longer, healthier, if you have love in your heart. But they ain't got no love in Washington. The Republicans in Congress are attacking President Obama's new budget. And some of his most vocal critics include Tea Party members.
That's right. They want to cut spending and balance the budget. Two great ideas. But do they have enough support to accomplish their goals? John Jessup looks at the influence of Tea Party lawmakers after a year on Capitol Hill.
It takes more than 2,000 pages to outline and explain President Obama's proposed budget for 2013. But Republicans are keeping count of another number, 1,021 days since the Senate produced a budget as required by law. At a press conference to mark the 1,000th day without a budget, Ohio Congressman Steve Stivers compared the budget to his baby girl.
My daughter Sarah, who's 868 days old, in fact, all of her life, there's not been a budget in this country.
Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid says the Senate won't take up a budget again this year. He blames Republicans for the gridlock in Washington, singling out the Tea Party as too extreme. But they say that label belongs to him.
What's extreme is how Washington, D.C. operates, how Harry Reid operates.
Tom Whitmore leads a Tea Party group in the nation's capital. While he had hoped to see more of the Tea Party's agenda become law, he doesn't hold it against the new members of Congress representing their agenda.
Tea Party members haven't been able to move, real far with the bills themselves, but where they've stood on legislation and issues that have been out there, they've done outstanding.
I think the Tea Party Congress has had an enormous influence on the direction of this town.
Political observers like George Washington University professor Christopher Archerton says their main accomplishment has been shifting Washington's obsession with spending to spending cuts, a top priority on their agenda.
There's a resolve within the Republican Party generally that they need to stop the drift of the Obama administration, but the steel in that resolve, it comes through the Tea Party.
Given their influence and the Republican majority in the House, many thought that the influx of Tea Party lawmakers would have a greater impact.
Of course, you're not satisfied, but understand this, you're not going to turn things in Washington, D.C. on a dime. But as I said, the conversation has changed.
Frustrated by their lack of progress on the legislative front and a decline in public opinion, freshman lawmakers are now on the offensive, aiming their criticism not only at Democrats, but Republican leaders here on Capitol Hill and how things are done in the Beltway.
This is the age of the Internet. We shouldn't have to wait till a few hours before a vote to actually find out what we're voting on.
Senator Jim DeMint, who runs the Tea Party caucus in the Senate, says Tea Party lawmakers won't be able to pass their agenda without more partners in the upper chamber. And it's his goal to get that done.
It took more than one election to get us in this hole. It's going to take more than one to get out. And that's where I'm trying to elect some conservatives to the Senate.
DeMint and others believe if they're successful, they'll finally have the leverage to adopt a responsible, fiscally conservative budget and make sure that Washington lives within it. John Jessup, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Ladies and gentlemen, aren't you somewhat appalled that the leader of the United States Senate, Harry Reid, has said, I will not bring a budget up for a vote this year? 1,000 days and they haven't had a budget. The United States has gone along from crisis to crisis with no budget. Why? There is no leadership in the White House, and Harry Reid knows that that nonsense that was brought forth from the White House would not even stand a chance of being passed by a Democrat-controlled Congress. So the president sends his chief of staff, former OMB budget director, sends him up to the talk shows, and he made the astounding statement that it takes 60 votes in the Senate to pass a budget.
Well, I mean, the machine is the machine.
Well, I mean, it takes 51 votes. It's a simple
Yeah,
majority. I
he
mean, this
wouldn't
is
know.
crazy. I mean, he knows better, and he said it twice.
Yeah.
I mean, who is he kidding? They can't get it through because it's the Republicans. Well, there are 53 Democrats in the Senate, and that is at least 2 more than they need
sure.
to pass a budget, and they can't do it. And this thing that Obama, he's going to want to jack up for example, the tax on dividends to like 39%. They have double taxation of dividends, you know, and it's just they tax at corporate level, then they want to tax it again, and then they want to tax it and you die, so it's triple.
Can that whole budget thing not work against Obama, though, in this next year? I mean, that certainly can be utilized going into the election, can it?
You know, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And Obama thinks he can fool all of the people all of the time. And it's just a question of how much foolishness people will go along with. But it is absolutely insane that we have a country, the greatest country on the face of the earth. And it's small wonder that the Egyptians are tweaking our nose and other people are doing the same thing because they perceive us as weak and rudderless. Whew. Okay. Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee?
House Republican leaders say they will support extending the federal payroll tax cuts through the end of the year. GOP leaders backed off their original demand that the tax cut be accompanied by spending cuts to pay for it. House Speaker John Boehner, though, says he doesn't want to be held responsible for a tax increase on more than 160 million workers. Negotiations continue over ways to pay for the remaining $50 billion needed to cover the extension of unemployment benefits and Medicare reimbursements for doctors. Moody's rating service has downgraded the credit ratings of 6 European nations. Here they are. Spain, Italy, Portugal are the big ones. Slovakia, Slovenia, and Malta are the other 3. Moody's says the governments of those nations haven't done enough to take care of their debt problems. And it may cut the AAA ratings of the UK and France as well. So far, investors have not been too concerned about the downgrades, but many analysts are still worried that Europe is still far from solving its debt crisis. An Egyptian cabinet minister has accused the U.S. of funding nonprofit groups to create chaos in Egypt. Abul Naga says the U.S. began directing those funds after the ouster of Hosni Mubarak last year. Naga is a leftover from the Mubarak regime, and she's been leading the crackdown on those foreign groups. 19 Americans face trial in Egypt on charges of trying to create unrest. But Chris Mitchell talked to a former Israeli ambassador to Egypt who believes a resolution to that standoff is at hand.
Ambassador Yitzhak Levinan was Israel's top diplomat in Egypt until late last year. He says both the Egyptians and Americans know this is not a good situation.
I think that there are ways and means to convince and to solve this problem that both sides will be satisfied, with this issue.
But there are mixed messages coming out of Cairo. The head of Egypt's ruling military council says the U.S. and Egypt need good relations. Another government minister, however, accused Washington of funding the groups in order to create prolonged chaos. The 19 U.S. citizens, including the son of Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood, are democracy and human rights workers from several non-governmental organizations. They're accused of being behind anti-government protest, creating unrest in Egypt. Lebanon says he believes, despite the crisis, there'll be a quick resolution to the problem.
I'm confident because, look, the alternative is not good. And I think that both sides understand this. And I am very confident that very soon this issue will be behind us.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Pat, what do you think? Do you think cooler heads will prevail in Egypt?
Well, you'd hope so. Lee, I've been absolutely dumbfounded to try to understand why the Egyptians are doing this. I mean, you've got $1.3 billion in aid on the line. You've got the credits from various banks that the United States could influence. You've got everything that Egypt needs. And why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? It just makes no sense at all unless they're trying to get one up on the Muslim Brotherhood and show, well, we're tougher than you are, so therefore we're more capable of staying in power. But I for one, can't understand it. So because you can't understand it, either there's a hidden agenda that will continue to play out, or else they're going to come down and say, look, this is silly. Let's make kiss and make up, which is more likely to what's going to happen. Lee.
Pat, the governor of Washington state signs same-sex marriage into law. Washington becomes the 7th state now to legalize gay marriage, and it goes into effect in June. But a legal challenge could place the law on hold until voters get a say in November.
So it really is a short-lived the celebration as far as people actually being, allowed to be married by law in the state of Washington. It's not going to happen until November.
New Jersey lawmakers have passed a bill to allow same-sex marriage in that state, but Governor Chris Christie says he will veto the legislation. Gas prices could hit $4 a gallon soon. Prices have been rising steadily in the last few weeks. You've probably noticed that, and the national average is now around $3.50 a gallon. Some analysts believe it could hit $4 by Memorial Day, and it could be much higher in some places. The key factor is whether or not there's going to be a war in the Middle East. Pat, I noticed one of the cheaper gas stations in our area was at $3.41 for regular this morning.
Well, it's on the way up. It's based on supply and demand, obviously, and the refineries have to do a changeover. They have a different blend in the winter and different blend in the summer, and they've got something for driving, and so they shut the refineries down to switch over, and that causes a sort of an artificial shortage. So I have no idea what they're going to do, but if the Straits of Hormuz gets closed down, if Israel attacks Iran, which seems pretty certain, and they're talking about doing it, or at least experts are talking about them doing it before June, then yes, the price of gas will not just go to $4. It'll be closer to $8 probably a gallon before they get through. So it could deal a body blow to the economy of Europe and the United States if there is a protracted conflict in the Middle East, and it is very, very possible.
China's next leader is visiting with administration officials in Washington this week. Vice President Xi Jinping is on a 4-day American trip. Today, he's visiting the White House for a meeting with President Obama. Xi will also meet with Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. The two likely will discuss North Korea, Iran, and Syria. After leaving Washington, Xi will head to Iowa and Los Angeles. He is set to replace Hu Jintao as China's communist leader this year. A group of young people called Generation Opportunity is working to make sure America's veterans know they're loved and appreciated. The group's president says their Valentines for vets is just one way they can honor them. He says he's learned just how tough the return home can be for some vets.
We've been out on the road a lot across the country, and what you see are a lot of young veterans who have returned. They're looking for jobs, and they don't ask for their service to be remembered directly, but when you thank them for their service, the response that you get is one of sincere gratitude. We wanted to make certain that in a tough economic time, while folks are trying to find jobs, that the #1 job that they did, beyond taking care of their family, was remembered.
Conway says they're accepting Valentines for vets all day. Well, you can find more on this story and a link where you can send your own message to veterans by going to our website at cbnnews.com.